Very excited to be here with Jackie, host of Las Gordas on YouTube and on TikTok, Gorda Corajuda on Instagram, other ways to find her. How are you doing today? You definitely have to explain to me what that means because I'm very interested.
Yeah, hi. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. Gorda Corajuda basically means fat, angry girl. And I thought it was funny. Because for a long time, the word gorda or fat girl has been demonized and it's been used like as a bad term. And I don't think that the word itself is a bad term. So it's kind of like my way to take it back because my family had used it in a negative connotation. And it was like, before you can call me that, I'm going to call myself that. And now I see it as a term of endearment.
That's so interesting. In my family, like they've used it as like, la gordita or el gordo. And it is a term of endearment already for them. And I felt like in English, it's definitely used more as a way to shame people. So that's cool that you're like retaking the word and trying to like give it a positive aspect of a term of endearment. And yeah, in my family it was always like, la gordita or this, like, and I never knew like, is it offensive to some people?
Yeah, it can definitely be offensive to some people. Like, even though they're trying to say it like in a nice way, it's still like an insult to a lot of people because for a long time, there's a lot of fat phobia in our community. So even if you're trying to say it in a nice way, it's not such a nice word. And so people aren't really used to just somebody calling themselves that in a positive way. So that's why I decided to take back the word.
Do you see that as like a kind of consistent issue with like older Latinx people that they see things as like, this is not offensive? Like, what do you mean this is not offensive? I'm using this as like a normal thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Even when like people will tell them that, hey, this is actually pretty hurtful because you might be saying this right now positively, but the way you talk about fat people overall is negative. So I know that you have negative connotation to it. So that's basically trying to explain to the older generation that it's not people being overly sensitive because they also don't like it when they get called that. You know, like they also have emotions and they also get hurt. So it's like validating their emotions and that will help them validate yours in the future.
And you got to tell me, so how did you start the TikTok? You're doing really well. I heard 10,000 or how many followers is it on TikTok you've passed?
On TikTok right now, I'm at 170,000.
Hey, that's popping. That's amazing. You got to tell me, so was that the first place that you started putting out like a message and started being so vocal about your beliefs? Or did you do it on Instagram before and you found more success on TikTok? I actually don't have TikTok, so I don't really know what the difference in like content making is, but I'd love to hear like what your process went in like this road to like being where you're at now.
Yeah, so I actually started creating content on YouTube, and it wasn't more so me talking about my beliefs. It was me talking about what I knew, because I used to work in higher education, specifically in admissions. So as a first generation student, I wanted to pass the knowledge along because when I got to students, it was like their senior year. So a lot of the information I wanted to share would have been great if they would have known it before. So I started my YouTube page, which was Las Gordas, where I just started talking about the college application process, things you want to do. And then my little sister is actually the one who got me into TikTok. And she was like, oh, don't even make a TikTok account. You're too old. Nobody's even going to pay attention to you, whatever. And so I started it as a joke to prove to her, I'm like, oh, watch, I'm going to blow up and you're going to feel sorry. And like a month in, I already had 30,000 followers. And I was like, oh, wow. So then I started to see that like our community really wants that. Our community really needs more creators, Latinx creators that are talking about our issues. You know, because a lot of the creators that we have basically kind of use our community like for clout. You know, like we have the influencers that all they do is talk about how much they love elotes, how much they love hot dogs, how much, you know, like we have the influencers that basically just go all on stereotypes from our community. And when a lot of people saw me just talking about issues and talking about things we need to work on and other things about our community, I got a really great response from that.
Hey, that's amazing. And what is it about TikTok you think that you found so much success so early on? Like I said, I'm not on TikTok, so I know that it's pretty quick videos. I've seen a couple that I think you had on TikTok and you brought them over to Instagram. What is it about TikTok that you think like has helped you find this platform and this voice?
Mhm. Well, I think a lot of people really like TikTok because it's a place where anybody can potentially blow up, right? Like you just have to get lucky with the algorithm. If enough people like your content, like you don't people don't have to be following you for them to see your content. So you could just randomly pop up on anybody's page. And the more people see and the more people interact with a particular video, then it gets shown out to a lot more people. And so people specifically on social media aren't used to seeing Latinx people talking about serious issues in a condensed, quick way. Like I try to do my videos really quick, obviously, because you only have 1 minute. And I try to explain it in a way that it's easy for people to understand. And I feel like a lot of our community is really deprived of that, because a lot of times when we're actually talking about issues, it's really complex and there's a lot of jargon in there. And so when I was talking in things really simple terms, everybody's like, you feel this way too? Oh my God, I feel this way too. And so a lot of Latinx youth really resonated with that.
And I watched one of your videos. And on your YouTube videos, you do more like stream of consciousness, just going and venting about anything that you've had on your mind throughout the week, right? That's where you could have like a little bit more long form type things. And do you find that it's harder to get people to watch like those long things? Like, is it easier when people have it condensed down to like a minute?
Yeah, it's definitely easier when people have it condensed down to a minute. And I don't know if you saw, but I haven't been posting on my YouTube channel as much because I just find it easier. Like the editing process is so much easier on a 60-second video versus like an hour-long video. And I just haven't had the time to record more YouTube content. So that's sticking to TikTok for now.
Hey, and you found like a lot of success and a lot of support on TikTok. So why not focus on the one that is like just popping off? And I watched one of your videos and I liked this. You went into this conversation about there's a point where you might be first generation Latinx born in the United States, and your parents, like their whole dream was, I need to get my kids there. I need to get to the United States so my kids have more opportunities than I had, so that they can go to college, so that they can have, the American dream is the thing. But then you said you get to a point where if you're in that first generation and you do go to college and you get that education, you then seem kind of like, and you feel like an outsider, because they might feel like, oh, what, you think you're better than me? Like they now see you in this like elite sense. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so in that video, I was basically venting about how a lot of first generation students have this sense of like, when you go to school, you don't fit in. You feel like you don't fit in. You feel like you don't belong there. Because in the university that I went to was predominantly white. And so that was a huge culture shock for me. Like I didn't see people like me. Even the town where my university was, there was no Mexican food around. Like it was completely different. So I didn't feel like I belonged. And then when I started to go home and started to talk to my family about the things I was learning, that didn't feel like home either, because now they felt like I was consistently judging and I was trying to impose and I was trying to change the way they were. And that was really difficult. And I feel like a lot of first generation students can identify with that, because you no longer know how to navigate spaces. Because when you go back to your institution, you feel supported because they also are learning the same things that you're doing, right? And that you're all learning. And so with these new, how to be more inclusive, how to be more supportive towards others, they understand that, but they don't understand your experiences as a person of color. And then when you go back home, they understand your experiences as a person of color, but they don't understand the inclusivity, the supportive, all of the other aspects. And so then people are like stuck in this limbo of, what do I call home? Where do I feel 100% comfortable now? And you kind of have to build that community for yourself, is what I found.
Hey, and so that is because you said you went to a university that was predominantly white? So the area that you live in now, I don't know too much about the demographics of Oregon. Is there any like Latino, Latina diversity, as in like from different countries, or is it mainly from, maybe Mexican Americans, or what is it like?
Yeah, so Oregon, the state itself is predominantly white. We do have Latinx population is not that big. Majority of them are Mexican or Mexican American. And we also do have a hefty Salvadorian population.
Hey, is there a lot of pupusas?
Yeah, but mostly Yes.
You said yes?
We got some good pupusas places around here.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
pupusas. Pupusas are so good.
Yeah, they're so good.
And do you feel that whenever you do interact with other like Latinx from different countries, that it's like a completely different conversation that you're having with them when it relates to, because I know a lot of the content you focus on refers to the Mexican American community and kind of like the issues and the relationships that they have. Do you find it that it's like very, very different, the you know, struggles and situations that other Latinx countries have? Or when you speak to them, like maybe it's not people that are in your community, but thanks to the internet, you know, you can get in touch with anybody from anywhere. Is it much of a difference?
So they experience, like on the big level, the amount of xenophobia, it's pretty similar. Like everybody experiences at the same level. But then when we start talking about struggles within our own community, that's when you see the key differences, you know, because Mexican Americans and Mexicans take over. Like when you think of Latinos, when other people think of Latinos, they automatically assume that everybody's Mexican or Mexican American. And so the struggles of people from Central America and South America often get erased. So for them, it's them talking about that, like the erasure of themselves, their identity and their culture, and how the Mexican community refuses to acknowledge that. Because a lot of times, and even in my videos, I've talked about xenophobia within the Latinx community towards Central American. I've seen a lot of people's comments start to be like, well, why would they get offended that they call Mexican? What's wrong with being Mexican? And it's like, that's not the issue. They're not saying that there's anything wrong with being Mexican. They're saying that it's wrong for them to assume. Like, and what does a Mexican person even look like? Exactly. Like, you don't like being called something that you're not. Like, it's not that they're saying that being Mexican is bad. It's like, acknowledge me for my identity and not for what you think I am.
It sounds like people are deflecting when they like say things like that, or like you said in one video where it's like people are so afraid of being called racist more so than the actions that they actually do. They're just like, they get real like, what do you mean? Like, I didn't say that. I'm not racist. And do you sense that a lot when you put out the content that you put out?
Yes, that's almost always the response that I get. It's super defensive. It's super deflective. It's like nitpicking at one thing that I said to avoid talking about like the whole subject. You know, like sometimes they'll even just focus, like most of the time when I post things and I get backlash from the Mexican community, the comments that I always get is like, well, you just hate the community then. Like all you talk about is the negative side. Why don't you ever talk about the good side? And it's like, I do, but we're talking about our issues. Like I've said this so many times, like I'm not here to tokenize my community for clout. I'm here to educate my community on things that we can do better.
In advance, right? That's always the goal is like, why? Yes, you can focus, and we have days, we have whole celebrations, we have whole periods of times where we celebrate achievements by our communities, but you also got to be moving forward, and that's a huge thing. So do you find it difficult? Like, have you had any trouble speaking with family members? Have you had any issues when it comes to like disagreements between them? Like older relatives?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Because you always get especially when you're talking with older folks, you always get the deflection of you're being disrespectful. You know, when you try to correct them on something that you're doing or you call them out for something problematic that you did, they say that you are being disrespectful. And I'm like, you really need to understand what disrespectful, when somebody's generally being disrespectful and when somebody's challenging you to do better. Those are two completely different things. And you cannot keep using this excuse that you're older, so therefore you know better. It's like, yes, you know better in a lot of things. You know more than I do in a lot of things, but I also have a different life experience that's allowed me to learn different things. And now I want to help you so we can improve together. And yeah, there's been definitely family members that I no longer talk to because we just cannot agree with that. And I just refuse to be disrespected.
Oh man, that's such a shame when it gets to that point, because it's like we should be learning from each other. Just be open to the dialogue and open to, there was things that you couldn't have learned in your generation because you didn't have access to the internet and all these resources that I am, you know, you came to America to give me, and I took advantage of it. That should have been the you know, congratulations, you took advantage of all the opportunities that those that came before you gave you. Why would you not want to pass on that knowledge that you learned and that others might not have been privileged enough to get? So that's always a shame when family members like get to that level. And I thankfully have never gotten to that. I have like a couple of tias down in Florida who they're gran tias, they're like my grandma's sisters, and my grandma told me that they were voting for Trump, and they got they got hit with the most propaganda message. The reason that they told my grandma that they were gonna vote for Trump was because they said Joe Biden was going to legalize abortion. And in my head, I'm like, abortion is already legal, but they didn't know, like they don't know that. And I'm not that close enough with them to tell them, but it really does suck. And like, do you see that a lot of your family is like led to misinformation? Like, I feel like I'm all the time getting this misinformation on WhatsApp. Like family group members will send me stuff on WhatsApp and I'm just like, oh God, like this is so fake, or like this is just like a YouTuber like in his basement that made it look good, but this is all wrong.
Right. Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I was sitting, I don't know what Univision looks like on the East Coast, but on the West Coast, like they all look different, right? Like the material that Univision puts out looks different. The types of stuff that our local like Spanish channels are putting on are definitely more on the conservative end. So like when the George Floyd case was happening, something that was like super disturbing, because I don't live with my parents, but I go in and visit them often. Like my mom was cooking in the kitchen and like the news were just on in the background. They were playing the video of George Floyd being murdered on a loop as they were criticizing George Floyd's life.
Oh God, what were they saying? He was a criminal, or he had past like...
Yeah, as they were saying like, oh, George Floyd wasn't the perfect man. He was like all of that, as they're showing people this person being murdered. Like that's propaganda. That was propaganda. And I was like, Mom, what do you know about George Floyd? And then she told me, and it was all wrong. Like, and I'm like, this is what our parents are hearing. And like also regarding COVID. So ever since like that happened and I told them, hey, the news, stop watching the news, they stopped watching news, but now they get their news from Facebook. And I'm like, no, stop doing that. It's worse. Like my dad, I was like, Dad, do you wear masks when you're at work? And he's like, no. And I'm like, why not? You're going to get COVID. And he's like, COVID's fake. And I'm like, no. So then I had to explain COVID. So like, I've made a few videos on TikTok where I'm like, hey, like speaking specifically to Latinx folks, the younger generation, I'm like, make sure you're explaining things to your parents in Spanish, because they don't have the same access to information that we do. Their access is specifically targeted to give them false information. I mean, we saw with like the whole Republican Party situation that they did during this election, they targeted Latinos by telling them that Democrats are socialists and Democrats are communists. And that's how they gained a lot of like Cuban votes, because they tricked them into believing that the Democrats are somehow socialists and communists when they're so far from that.
I wonder what is the way to make those attacks less effective, because I truly believe that the Republicans would have literally copied and pasted the whole socialist thing and just said it, like if it was Bernie as the nominee, if it was Kamala as the nominee, they would have literally just done it to anybody. Copy and paste. Okay, insert blank here is a socialist. And they definitely did it to Obama back in 2012 and 2008. But the thing is, so I was reading, Obama actually down in Florida won the Cuban vote on election day. Because of the absentee ballots, Mitt Romney took the lead, but only by a few percentage points. So it's like the Cuban American population down there is definitely reachable. Like we can definitely reach them with some type of message, but we 100% gotta like make that socialist attack less effective. Like do some type of messaging and be like, listen, this is not true. And anyways, the United States has plenty of socialist programs that you probably enjoy. Like how many of you are on Medicaid or Medicare and like getting that? And Florida, they passed a $15 minimum wage on a direct ballot initiative. So like, which Joe Biden supports. So it's like, you guys didn't vote for the candidate who does this, but you did support the issue. There's gotta be a way to get that messaging across. And the reason that I reached out to you was actually because my cousin shared one of your videos, the one where you're talking about, let's get serious about Latinos for Trump. And I was like, yo, this is somebody who was like, all right, we actually got to talk about this. Like, haha, we all laugh about it and stuff. I laugh about it, Latinos for Trump, but it's a serious thing. And we saw him make gains in some Latino communities. It wasn't just the Cuban American community either. Like, I think according to NBC, 46% of his increase in Florida was from Colombians and Nicaraguans. So there's something there. Can you talk a little bit more about like, why would Latinos vote for Trump? Why would they support Trump with all the rhetoric that he's done? Like, obviously, he didn't win the Latino vote, thankfully, but he made gains in it.
Yeah.
Which, like, what?
Yeah. So the big thing that everybody discovered is that not all Latinos have the same political views, right? In this election, that was the big thing. And oh my God, sorry, I just completely lost my train of thought.
Take your time, it's a podcast.
As a question again?
So just like, yeah, explain what you were saying in that video, like reasons why Latinos would vote for Trump, even though like the rhetoric that he spills out.
Right, okay, yeah. So the big thing that everybody learned is obviously we don't all have the same political views, and that Latinos are not a monolith. We're not homogenous. We all think very differently. We all come from different countries. We all have different customs and different cultures. Some of us even speak different languages, and we're all from different races. Mm-hmm. Everybody values different things. So it's kind of like, it seems a little ridiculous that people would assume that all Latinos would vote a certain way, mm-hmm. right? And so that's what basically the world was just like, the country was just like, how come people would support Trump? And it's like, because people are different. People have different values. People have different class statuses. And also like from countries that have been destroyed by socialism and communism, that rhetoric that the Republicans keep sending really stirred them towards the Trump vote. And Trump also really encouraged people to other themselves, right? Because in the very beginning of his election, Trump targeted immigrants, specifically immigrants, and he made them look like the bad guys. So for Latinx that had been here for several generations, they did everything they could to distance themselves from that, right? They're like, we're not them. We came here the right way, or we've been here for a really long time. And so those people, where you have somebody who's in power who's saying those people are bad and they don't want to be targets, they're going to distance themselves. And so that's why more and more Latinos tend to gear for Trump. And also I heard a lot of, from that video, I heard a lot of people in Texas, Latinos in Texas, where a lot of them work in the oil industry, and Trump is bailed out the oil industry, and he got a lot of, he approved a lot of more drilling. And so they support him because he has given them jobs. So it's a lot of parts of the community were willing to sacrifice the vulnerable parts of the community just so they could benefit. And that's what it was, you know, like not everybody has the same level of empathy, and not everybody cares about more vulnerable people if they're not the ones that are being immediately affected.
Exactly. Yeah. Like once you get a few generations down, people that are born, like Latinos and Latinas that are born here, don't even have the thought of immigration. They don't even have like those stories that where they can hear like, oh, when we were in our countries where we were born in and all this, and when we came here, and they're so far displaced from that. And yeah, I saw he I don't know if he won, but he definitely made huge improvements in a couple counties on the Texas border. And I don't know where I heard it, but a journalist was describing that a lot of the Latinos and Latinas down there, their jobs are, they work for border control, like they work for immigration. Yeah. That's literally a big employer down there, which obviously like molds a little bit of their view on how they see the situation and how they see Trump. It's just, it's also like, so I think everybody was celebrating, look, we beat Trump, like that's it. You got the boot, you lost your job. It wasn't necessarily a celebration for Joe Biden. Joe Biden wasn't like the number one pick. He wasn't like
right. Nobody was celebrating. Yeah.
It wasn't
we were just celebrating that we defeated him. Yeah.
Exactly. That he's out, and that we can now start steering the ship back in the right direction and like, you know, reverse some of this damage that he's done. But it wasn't like, oh, Joe Biden inspires like a strong message. In fact, I remember during the primary, because I was following it, and like transparently, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. I remember seeing a clip. Hey,
yeah,
Bernie, I got a sign somewhere here because I went to his Queens, Bernie's back rally, which was amazing. It was huge. But I remember watching a clip of a Latino man asking Joe Biden about the deportations under the Obama administration. And he was like, go vote for Trump. Vote for Trump. Vote for Trump. And it was like, hey, man, you don't even want to listen to this guy's like valid criticism that deportations under Obama. You're just going to brush him off. And it almost felt like that was the whole campaign, where it was just like, Latinos, like they'll vote for me. Like, let's not even really like put in that much effort. And so I don't want to get Joe Biden off the hook. Like he should have done a better job reaching out and putting out that message.
Definitely.
And then another thing is, yeah, like not all Latinos care about immigration. So like a lot of Latinos, they list, what are your top 3 priorities? Corona handling, the economy, and jobs. All things that should that affect everybody across the spectrum, especially during a pandemic where we had so much levels of unemployment. What do you think the Democrats can do better? Because I am a little worried that right now, Biden still won the Latino vote and the Latino and Latina vote, but in the future, 2024, if the Republicans are smart and they see, okay, look, this was working, even though Trump's crazy, outlandish rhetoric, he still was able to make increases. And I think he got like the second most votes in all popular election history, only second to Joe Biden this election.
Yeah, it was definitely a historic turnout for voting because people felt really strong. Like Trump did a lot of damage to our country, and his supporters really love him. Like they support him. He could do anything and they'll still support him. And I think that the Democrats have gotten too comfortable that they're always going to have the minority support. Like it's the same thing with the Black community. It's the same thing with the Asian community, you know, like their whole thing the past few years has been like, vote for us because we're not Republicans. Like we're not them. Like the Republicans are the hateful ones. Like we're the progressive ones, without ever actually like addressing real issues. Like, you know, in California, yes, California went to Joe Biden, but California also had on the ballot rent control, and they didn't approve it. It didn't go through. Damn. Californians voted for no, and how does that make any sense? Like California is known as like this epitome of like being a liberal Democrat state, but you won't approve rent control. So a lot of the things that the Democratic Party needs to look at is they need to stop being so elitist, and they need to start addressing actual issues that affect these communities, which is they need to start investing in education a lot more. They need to start passing laws to get rent under control. They need to help with higher education. And of course, they also need to address immigration, and they need to address DACA students. You know, like those are all things that are really going to benefit not just the Latino community, but all minority communities. And I feel like that's what will make a lot of people trust the Democrats again. And also, I just don't believe that this two-party system can keep working because you just get people voting to vote for their party, and people aren't actually looking at what the candidates have to say. Because like you were saying, Joe Biden was not the best pick. No. But we went with it, and we all had to go with it because he's not Trump. There were a lot of people. Yeah, there were a lot of other candidates that had great issues, and as soon as Joe Biden won, those issues stopped being talked about completely. So this can't keep going on because nobody really benefits. You just have to choose between the lesser of two evils
every time. And there's already reports that Donald Trump may run again in 2024. And I can totally
Is that even allowed?
I have, it's like only been done a couple times, but if anyone's going to do it, he will, which only like, it sets up the next 4 years to be like, oh, if Donald Trump comes back, like we can't go too far left. We can't do these social democratic policies because, you know, there's an existential evil that's coming ahead in 4 years. So let's not criticize Joe Biden at all because we don't want to give them ammunition. And it's like, how will we ever progress like this with this, like just every 4 years or every 8 years reversing what the last president just did? Because that's what Obama did, reversed a whole bunch of Obama regulations just so that Joe Biden can now go back and reinstate them all. Like it's just no progress.
Nobody moves. We don't get to move forward. Yeah, like that's what it seems, this teeter-totter, right? Like Clinton did all this progress and then Bush came in and set all of it back into a recession. Obama fixed the recession. Now Trump, we're back in a recession. And now Biden, like, you know, it's just this going back and forth, and it's just like both of them trying to screw over constantly, and the American people are the ones who end up paying for it.
And what are like the issues that you know, motivate you the most? Like, what are the things that you care most about? Because I see, so you're an intersectional feminist, correct? Which is a term I would love for you to explain to me, because I've seen it all the places, like everywhere, and I know it's a good thing. I know that it means like you care about more issues than I know it's that you care about a lot of issues. And so if you could explain what that means to you, and then what those issues are that like mostly drive you.
Yeah, so I like that you asked that, because a lot of the times on my TikTok videos, people are like, who are you for? Like, who do you even like go for? Because you criticize everything. Like, I don't understand what you're doing here. And so my favorite term is intersectionality, because intersectionality basically says that we are all made up of different identities. Like, there is not one identity that defines you. So for example, me, like, I'm a woman, right? But I'm also a woman of color. I am also part of the LGBTQIA community. I also have mental health issues. Like, I'm passionate about mental health issues. So you are part of many different worlds. And when you're walking along the world, you have many different faces depending on what group you are facing. And so intersectionality addresses that you are not just a woman. You are not just a member of the LGBTQIA. You are part of this bigger world, and you cannot talk about one issue without talking about the other. Mm-hmm. So, and that's what a lot of people don't really understand. So specifically when we're talking about Latinx issues, a lot of people solely want to talk about immigration. And then when you try to bring up machismo, when you try to bring up femicidio, we try to bring all of those, people get upset and they're like, that's not what we're talking about. And it's like, we cannot talk about Latinx issues without talking about all of the issues, because there's multiple things going on.
Of course, yeah. And so is this like the next? I know there's been waves of feminism, kind of, and so there's been like first wave, second wave. Is this now a just more inclusive feminism? Because I know it might have been second wave was more the benefits, like kind of helped out more white women in suburban like areas where, you know, they were now in offices, they were in better positions in business and stuff, but it didn't include obviously trans women. It didn't include women of color. Like the benefits went way less to them. So is this more just of an inclusive form of feminism?
Yes.
Okay.
This is a way more inclusive form of feminism, and it's also addressing issues that have to do with males as well. It also includes males. Okay,
so and in what ways does it include males? Because I know that's obviously like one of those kind of defensive triggers for men, where it's like, what do you mean? Like, do you hate men? Like, I'm not toxic masculinity and all this. So like, in what ways does this form of feminism address all that?
Right. So down to the roots, feminism just wants equality across the gender spectrum, right? And that also includes men. Like, people don't want to be more than men. People just want to be equal too. And so this wave of feminism is doing a really great job at addressing the fact that toxic masculinity and the patriarchy also affect and set back men, right? And a lot of the things and where men have an easier time understanding, it's like in regards to emotional development, right? Like, emotional development for men is not really looked at in a positive way, right? Like, young boys are never really allowed to express themselves, you know? Their only emotions that they're allowed to feel is anger and happiness. Like, they're not allowed to feel sad. They're not allowed to feel confused. They're not allowed to express themselves. So it's kind of teaching men that it's okay to be vulnerable, and that the reason why you're the way you are is because society didn't allow you to, because they told you what a man should be. And there's no right or wrong way as to how a man should be. So it's including them in that conversation instead of like, you're just toxic. It's like, no, this is why you are the way that you are now.
Hey, I like that so much better. And I think another great example of that would be, because I see like there's men's right activists now, which is hilarious to me. Like, when did we not have men's rights? Like, it's just stupid to me.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they always say is, oh, women in like paternal court, and like when it comes to child custody, women get preferred treatment from judges and stuff. Well, it's like, why? Because we live in this society where we believe that women are the caregivers automatically, and that they're the ones that should be taking care of the kids. We live in that type of society, so that molds the views of the judges and the system, where it's like, okay, now it comes down to, where does the child go, the mother or the father? Well, we're gonna go with the mother, who is what we perceive as the caregiver. So it ultimately ends up affecting men.
Yeah, it's also like, women didn't put that view on themselves. Men did. Men made them the caregiver. And so that society views us this way because that's what men designed it to be. So it's like, now they're like, oh, this isn't fair. It's like, yeah, but we didn't come up with that in the first place. And that's what we're talking about. Like, this affects you too. Like, these set of rules affect all of us and are restricting all of us.
100%. Yeah. And it feels almost like that's like a less hostile way of going at it, because some people, especially on social media, get like real triggered real quick. And like, I truly believe that it's very hard to have a real, genuine, like mind-changing conversation on social media. Like, I don't know about like for you, but do you ever?
Yeah, like, you really can't.
Right? Do you ever benefit from going back and forth in the comment section?
No, it does not work, you know, because when you're reading something via text, you can interpret it differently. You don't know, you're going to read it in whatever tone you want to read it. So even though I might be saying it in an educational way, you might think that I'm being condescending towards you, right? So it's like going over text back and forth does not work. So usually what I do when I see a few comments that are kind of like the similar defensive and they're saying the same argument, I'll just make another video. I'm like, I'm seeing this is why I believe that this is wrong. And also you always want to clarify, like, I'm not making this up as I go. Like, this is what I've learned through the education that I've received. This is what I've learned through my life experiences. I didn't just wake up today and decide that the patriarchy is a thing. Like, explaining that this is not me personally trying to attack you. I'm telling you about a system that exists and how it affects both of us.
Yeah, exactly. That is a great way. And so I have to get to it because I've seen on social media, the social media that I have you on Instagram, where one of the big things that you talk about is the Latinx community saying the N-word. And so I would love for you to talk about that, because I know you've gone back and forth with plenty of people. I've seen a couple comments on YouTube and then a couple on Instagram. I'd love for you to express your views on that.
Yeah. So a lot of the Latinx community thinks that we get a pass to say the N-word because we are also people of color. And a lot of people believe that they have a pass because they live in communities with a lot of Black people and they've just been raised in their community. It's been okay for them to say that, like, Black people don't get offended. Like, that's what they tell me. And I always try to explain, I'm like, okay, but you don't live your entire life in that community. When you step out of that community and you go out into the rest of the world, when somebody hears you say that word, they think you're ignorant and they think you're a racist. Now, why do they think that? Because that word is engraved in hatred. That word was created to dehumanize a group of people, and it's been used to dehumanize them and to hate them for centuries. And it's still being used like that to this day. So how is somebody who does not know you supposed to know whether you're saying it in a friendly way or if you're saying it in a hateful way, when you could say it friendly and then 2 seconds later somebody will say it in a hateful way? Like, you can't, because people a lot of times are like, it's in tone, and it's like, it doesn't matter your tone, because that word is still currently being used to dehumanize Black people.
Well,
and it's not okay.
Do you think there's a difference between it with the ER at the end and the A at the end? Because I feel like that would be the difference people would say, where like, this is how you tell if it's hostile or if it's in like a my homie kind of friend way, is I'm saying it with the A at the end. Nobody's saying it with the ER at the end. And if you ever heard a rap song with the ER at it, you would be like, whoa. But you're so used to hearing it with the A, especially with like, because like Fat Joe, there's a lot of Latinx rappers and entertainers that have said it like growing up, and like Fat Joe, even to today, Cardi B says it, Tekashi 6ix9ine says it, Pop Smoke, who is half Panamanian, he says it in all his songs. So it's like, how much of it is it like, look, we're just listening to the artists that are saying it out there. Everybody is saying it with the A, like, you know, not everybody. It's definitely a whole other conversation with white people, which is why I find it so interesting to talk about the Latinx relationship with it, because I will be the first to admit, I'm from New York. Like, here, I used to rap. So my early 20s, and like I started rapping when I was 18, I just hung out with a lot of rappers who happened to be Black. And so I would say the N-word because I had that mentality where it was like, we got the pass, like we're in there. You know, Fat Joe has said it, Big Pun has said it. There's all these Latinx artists who have said it and nobody's wrong with it. And I grew up with people, I would say it in rap ciphers, like when we did perform shows and stuff, and nobody ever checked me on it. But now, like, I'll be the first to admit, it has gradually faded out of my vocabulary. I haven't said that, like, I haven't really said it in years. Like, it just, and I don't have a exact reason why. It just kind of faded out of my vocabulary. But I do know that in New York, it is so, like, I still got cousins who are Dominican, 100% Dominican, and they say it because they grew up in the Bronx, they grew up in Queens, they grew up in these neighborhoods that were so diverse. And for them, it's just like, listen, I grew up saying it, like I hear all these artists saying it, and we clearly don't mean it the hateful way. Like, we know the history of it, but we're still saying it in a way where it's not hateful. So what do you say about that? Because I do think it's very different in New York, and I've spoken, like, I've made this a point to speak about it with people, like with Black people on my show. Like, what do you think about this? And it's always mixed. It's always a little bit different. Like, there are people that will say, like, look, I don't care. Like, I really don't care. Like, if you identify more with Black culture and this, blah, 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 like, I don't care. And then others who they're like, you know, we grew up in Cincinnati, or we grew up in the Midwest, and like, that is a very different thing out there than it is in New York. Like, in New York, this is like a very different thing out here, the relationship between those two communities. So what do you think about that? Yeah,
I mean, I think what you're saying with New York can also apply to basically every major city in the US, like LA, Portland, Atlanta, like all of those cities. Like, people will have the same reasoning. It's like, I'm not saying it in a hateful way. I don't mean it that way. But I think it's really interesting that we all know and we all can recognize that when a white person says it, even if they're not saying it in a hateful way, we're all like, you can't say that, right? And it's like, well, wait a minute. Like, just because you're Latinx doesn't automatically mean that you're a person of color. Like, you know, like, you have to understand that. Like, we have white Latinos too. So like, being Latino is not automatically a pass. And yes, sure, there are some Black people that are okay with you saying it around them, and that's them. But the Black community as a whole has multiple times said, if you're not Black, please don't use this word, right? There are so many different words that we can use. Why is it necessarily that you want to use that one? And I know a lot of people want to use music as an excuse, you know, because they hear artists saying it and they hear that. And I heard a quote, and I can't remember who said it, but it was so good. It's like, don't use music as an excuse for your ignorance, right? Like, even though you know that the history behind the word, but you keep hearing it in these songs, you think that it's okay. Well, no, it's not. It's not okay, because people are still hurt by that. And people still say it with the A and still mean it in a really hateful way. Like, that's why it's so hard for a lot of people to accept why it's okay for people to say this word, because people are always like, I'm not saying it with the ER. And it's like, the ER is like the ultimate hateful thing that you can call a Black person, but people still use it with the A to dehumanize them as well. So you can't say, like, the word can't coexist in a friendly way and in a hateful way. Like, it's just, it doesn't work like that, you know? Like, people will also be like, then why do Black people say it? And it's like, well, they reclaim that word. That word was used to hurt them. They have taken their power from that word, so they get to say it. Are there Black people that say it in a negative way to describe other Black people? Yes, but that's their issue. Like, we don't get to tell Black people what they can and cannot do. But when it comes to like a word that was created to dehumanize them, they get to tell us whether or not we can say it. And majority says we can't say it, so
is that true though?
Let's just listen to them.
I tried finding, I literally tried typing in like, what do Black people think about Latinx saying the N-word? And I was like, let me find a survey or a poll or something. I couldn't find anything where it was like, okay, this is what they say. So I found a lot of like opinion op-eds, columns and stuff where it would say like, you know, don't say it. But at what point do we now erase the voices of Black people who say like, look, we don't care, like, because there are like, this is what it is there's not a monolith of idea. So like we said, there are obviously Black people who don't care, and then there are Black people who do care, which to me is why it was like, look, if you go to a different community, if you grew up hearing it and you grew up saying it, and then you went to a different community and you said it and someone was like, hey, I don't like you saying that, then you should stop saying it. It's the same thing as like if somebody says, look, this is my pronoun, and then you refuse to call them their pronoun, you're an asshole. If somebody tells you like, look, I'm not cool with you saying this word, and you keep saying it, you're an asshole. Like, that's really what it is. Like, do not invalidate people's feelings about this. And Black people do not need to explain why they can or can't say it. Like, they do not need to explain that at all. It's almost though like, you know, I believe language changes over time. The NAACP is, what is it? The National Advancement of something colored people. The UNCF is the United Negro College Fund. These are two huge organizations that push for Black rights and stuff. But these terms are like, you would never hear Negro, colored people. Like, these are outdated terms and stuff. And it's almost like, at what point do we put the pressure on hip hop artists? I think there was a couple of hip hop artists and a couple of radio DJs last year who said, look, we're not saying the N-word anymore. We want this dead across. The NAACP in like 2005 held a a funeral for the N-word. They were like, we want this gone across the board. And it's like, we gotta, at what point do we put pressure on the entertainment industry to be like, look, stop saying this, especially like the Cardi B's and the Tekashi 6ix9s, because they have so much influence and they are Latinx.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot. Well, so Cardi B has come out and said that she is part Black. So that's her reasoning as to why she says it. And I haven't really looked at
one parent is
too much into her history.
Yeah, one parent's Trinidadian, and the other's Dominican, is what it is. Her.
Yeah, so that's why she says that it's okay. But a lot of people, a lot of Black people keep coming after Tekashi 6ix9ine because
he's Mexican.
Why are you saying it? You know,
Mexican
like
American.
Yeah, like there's no reason for you to be saying. But Tekashi 6ix9ine is a terribly problematic person all around. So he's never gonna listen. You know, like I mean, there's a lot of accusations to his behavior. So Tekashi 6ix9ine is a terrible example. But there are, I mean, there are Black artists that, there are Black artists that have chosen to stop using the N-word. And again, there are other Black artists that they use it in their music. I mean, I don't know if you ever saw the video. I think it was Kendrick Lamar. He brought a white fan up on stage to go rap word for word on a verse, and the fan said the N-word, and he was like, "Whoa!" Like, you remember that?
You gotta
like,
censor that one word.
You can't say that.
Yeah,
you gotta censor that word. And
she was white,
like, well,
right? I'm pretty sure she was white.
Song. Yeah, she was white.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was white. And so it's like, if we can all understand that, why do we have such a hard time when like other communities, like it's not just the Latinx community, the Asian community also uses the N-word so much. And it also, like, I think what this all comes down to is that all of our communities have deep roots with anti-Blackness. Mm-hmm. So that's what this whole conversation comes down to. Our community has a lot of anti-Blackness. Mm-hmm. And so we do not get to claim that we can say this word and we have a past when there is so much anti-Blackness.
That's valid.
Ingrained. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I feel like that's honestly what it all comes down to. Like our community, the Asian community, like every community has deep roots in anti-Blackness. And that's why we can't say that we should be able to use this word that is also rooted in hatred and anti-Blackness. That
is all very valid. You have great points. Have you ever spoken to a Black person that is like, yo, I'm cool with it?
Yeah. So I have a lot of friends in college. We had a lot of these conversations and they were like, yeah, I'm cool with it. And they're like, but I also respect that there are other people that aren't cool with it. So like I tell my friends, they can say it around me, but like if you say it around another person, like they might punch you in the face and you have to be okay with that because your actions have consequences. So even if I tell you it's okay, the person sitting next to me might not think it's okay. And you have to be ready to defend why you think you should say that word.
I completely agree. You have freedom of speech, but somebody has like freedom to hold you accountable for what you say. That is something that my friend once told me, and that is the perfect thing. Like, yeah, look, if you feel ballsy enough to say it and then they say, yo, what the fuck? And they punch you in the face, like be prepared for those consequences. But like, I truly do think that people that say it and like, for example, people from New York that grew up saying it, Latinx people that grew up saying it here, they're not going to go to a different community and just like say it out loud walking down the block. It's going to be like where they're friendly with another Black person from that community. And if there's a friend of a friend there who is Black and it's like, yo, I'm not cool with that, then that's a whole discussion of like, dude, just don't say it. Like this person obviously doesn't want you to say it. Don't be an asshole. But I do think that you are extremely reasonable about this. Like I saw a couple people saying like, hey, why'd you block me on TikTok? And you were like, well, it's because I tried explaining this concept to you and you didn't understand. I got annoyed and I blocked you. But I do think that you are completely reasonable about like the points and understanding and hearing the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, I'm going to keep having a conversation with you as long as we're both actually listening to one another. But if I feel like you just want to be right the whole time, there's no point. There's no point of this conversation to keep going because you're not going to see my point. You're just trying to convince me of your point, and that's not a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what it is. And that's what I feel social media is like. Just trying to shut the other person down and like just trying to get points on them, like just being, I don't know, it's not real dialogue and it's not going to change or improve anybody's life. But I do see that people, that's like a big thing for you and that people obviously have different feelings about it. But, you know, at the end of the day, it really is up to the Black community to say, look, if we don't want this, like if we don't want you to say this, then you shouldn't fight us on this. Like, why the hell are you going to fight us on a word that was used to literally oppress us? That's what it comes down to.
Exactly. That's the thing, like on social media, where like if there's a Black person telling you, hey, stop saying it, stop writing huge paragraphs as to why you think it's okay for you to say it. Just don't say it. It's not that hard. Like, stop saying it. I don't understand.
Straight up.
We all understand, like, there are racial slurs directed at us. We don't like it when we get called racial slurs. So same thing. It's the same thing.
Straight up. I think it's a little different just because it's so mainstream. That's what it is. It's like you don't hear like beaner in a song. You don't hear like wetback or spick, like these derogatory terms. Like, it's just so mainstream, which is why I think there should be some type of conversation amongst the entertainment industry to be like, listen, just for Latinx artists,
right.
like, yo, because it's so influential.
Agree with you. Yeah, the entertainment industry doesn't get held accountable for a lot of the damage that they do. You know, like there's a lot. I mean, the entertainment industry has been responsible for a lot of communities being associated with negative stereotypes, like films, music, TV shows. All of those have like been used to make fun and take jabs at different communities, and we've all kind of been like, it's so funny. It's just like that's how the times were. But it's like, to the people that they were offending, it was never funny. It was never funny. But we keep letting the entertainment industry just kind of get away with so much horrible things.
Amen to that. Yeah, that is 100% true. This has been an awesome conversation, Jackie. Can you let the listeners know where they can find you, where they can get more of your content?
Yeah, so you can go to any of my social media. It's all going to be at Gorda Corajuda. I mainly post a lot on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm going to be a little better about posting onto YouTube, but if you go to any of my socials, I do have my link tree there, and you can just find all my other social media.
Hey, and all of that will be in the show notes for sure. Jackie, thank you so much for coming on the show. Like I said, it was a great conversation. I do think that you are extremely reasonable and willing to like actually have a conversation about these like controversial issues that like maybe the reason that we're having these discussions is because it was never brought up in the past. And like, it's the first time that it's actually being brought to the attention of our communities. So I think that this was a great conversation, and I'm excited to see more of your work in the future.
Thank you.
Hey.